people got the impression that we were being pushed down a road where it was of the Crown's making, and that they were in complete control of that strategy. And then on the other hand, there was a loud voice, especially those led by the Waitangi Action Committee, who used to, talk to all of us about why we shouldn't support it. But then on the other hand, there was talk at home. The kōrero on the marae was clear that, this is our time.
Tēnā koe, mō tēnei wāhanga kia noho tahi tātou, mō tēnei kaupapa o te hau o Makuru. Thank you for participating in what is going to be a really, I think, epic piece of storytelling for our children and our mokopuna. But I would like to take you back to your early years. You were raised at Wāhi with your grandparents. And I was curious to know how you as a young child at Wāhi learnt about Raupatu or heard the old people talk about Raupatu. What was important to them in your early years?
Ia e tamaraki ana. Nohi nei, ka kawe atu taku māma ki taku tupuna ki a tawaru. Ono wiki i te pakeke. Ka waiho hia hau. Kia rāua, mā rāua a hau e tiaki. Tupu ai. I reira ka kite au te ao Māori nei. E tauawhi nei i te tamaiti. I roto anō i ngā torotoronga o te kingitanga. Now, ka mutu, ko tahi atu te reo i roto i tō mātou whare, ko te reo Māori. Ka re taku tupuna e mōna ki te kōrero Pākehā. E ui o mōna te pānui i te niupepa. Me taku kuia. Ka mutu koe te mea pānui i te niupepa i te best bet. Koe rā, tana tino puka. Ko te ia hau e whakamara mana, ko te whē te hoiho pai. Te mea tere, te au mā. I roto anō i ngā whakamārama a Pākehā nei, i reira ka whakamārama hiau ngā tino kōrero. I roto anō i te reo Māori. Nō reira, e tupu atau i roto i te ao Māori. Tūturu nei. Ko te nui o ngā whānau he kaumātua kei roto. E toru pēr ngā rua, ngā reanga o tēnā whānau. Ko te whānau haunui, te whānau tomo, rāwiri, rāhe. Ko te kuia rere mōna. A waha mā, away atu, rātou katoa i mohio nei ahau. Iau e tamariki ana. Ka mutu, I rongo, ko tahi atu te wāhi mā ngā tamariki, ko te kawe atu mātou ki roto i te kihini mahi ai. Ka rea mātou i whakai atu kia kuri mātou ki nunga i te mara. He wāhi i rāhui hia mō a kaumātua. Yeah.
So aua tikanga i te e koe i taua wā, he tikanga tūturu o te marae, i raro i te maru o te kīngitanga, he ha te ki tō titiro, he ha te tino taonga o taua tupuranga.
Ko te kapo i ngā kōrero a ngā mātua mō te auatanga ki te Raupatu. Nea. I ākona mātou ki ngā waiata. I reira e whakātua ana i ngā hitori o tēnā mea te Raupatu. I roto anō i ngā hui katoa e kōrero Raupatu ana rātou. Ngā rātou waiata, ngā rātou kōrero. Tō mātou hau katoa. E kōrero i te Raupatu. Ka haere nei mātou ki te kura o rākau mga. Kei reira e kōrero Raupatu ana. ahakoa I whakangungoa mātou ki roto I te reo no a pārea me ngā huatanga ako o te ao pārea. E rere tonu ana ngā kōrero I wānganui a mātou I te mea. Mātou, ka tōtō mātou ki te pāmu o te kuini, mira ka kau I ngāta, whakahoki atu ki te kāinga. Hākoa ko te regatta, te koronehana, kaue atu mā te mai a mātou nohi ana ki te marae, ki reira noai.
Ko wai mā ngā pauako, ngā kaiako kei te kura I taua wā?
Mr. Broadhurst, koe anahe te Pākehā. Ko te whānau Pākehā ki Wainganui a mātou. Ko te wahine o mea o rākau mangane o kaitimu, a te o ngā Sam, a koe te o ngā Mahita. Ko te kuia, ko te hoa wahine o mea o wetere paki, te hoa tuarua, koe te o ngā kaiako. No reira, he rahi tonu ngā kanohi Māori I te kura o rākau manga I tērā wā. Nā, I reira e kōrero ana mō te kingitanga, nea. He mea, e hara I te āhuatanga hou. Ko tēnā mea te kingitanga, kei roto mātou I ngā āhuatanga katoa. Ara mai mātou I te ata, hoki anō mātou ki te moi. Ko ngā āhuatanga katoa o te kingitanga e rere ana I te marae. Nā te mea he tino marae, mātou kare rakana ngā kua o ngā whare.
So aha koa he wāhi reo Pākehā te kura, ko ngā tikanga Māori e tūtonu kei Wainganui te kura.
Ai, ki te ane rongo ana I ngā hutanga Māori, ia mātou I te kura. Ākoa he native school tā mātou I tēnā wā. E whāngai ana mātou, e akuna mātou I te reo Māori, ko mea ko teora iti kelkot. Koe te o mātou kaiako. Mo te reo Māori. Ko te kuia, te o wahine o mea o wetere paki koe te wana mai whakākoi a mātou ki te reo Māori. Ai.
Te wheo mahara tanga ki te awa o Waikato ki te manga o wāhi, tai atu ki te roto a wāhi.
Koe rā tō mātou kāinga tuarua. Ka mutu wā mātou mahi I roto I te wharekai, ka haere katoa mātou ki te kaukau. He puna, he wāhi kei tō mātou puna kaukau, kei te kokanga o te wāhi stream e kia nei. Nā mai a mātou e tamariki ana, kona mātou e kaukau ana I ngā wā katoa. Ka hoha mātou ki tērā wāhi, ka puta atu mātou ki te awa Waikato. I tērā wā e mākatoa ana te wai. Ka kite koe I ngā inanga, ngā matamata e re mai ana, ne kaukau mai ana I te awa. E ia mātou I te awa Waikato, e ruko ana mātou I tēnā me te kaio. Ko te kūtai, e momo kūtai tērā, ne. Ka koe ia mātou, ka whiua ki roto I te ai, hei kai mā mātou. Nā, nā mahi katoa, ia mātou tamariki ana, inu ana mātou I te wai o Waikato. Inu ana mātou I te wai o wai. Ai, e pērā te mā o te wai. Ka mutu, ina ihia mātou I te haere ki te wharepikitia, ka whakahuhi mātou I te tau Waikato, tango hiu a mātou kākau, ka tei ka purutia mā te ringa, ka kaukauhi atu mātou I te awa Waikato. Kare.
Whakawhiti te awa, ki te taone.
Ai, he mea tawhiti rawa ki te hikoe. Ka kaukau mātou mā te awa, nea. Ka haere pēr ko tahi rau mita, ka whai mātou I te au o te awa, ne? Ko te au o te awa e kaue ana mātou. Ki te Wainganui I te awa, nā kei reira, hanga kare tino hohonu ana, ne? Ka tae koe te hikoe. So ka purutia wa mātou ka e pēnei ana, ne? Kia kau e māku. E pēnei katoa ana ngā tamariki o wai e kakau. Ka hua ngenge te mātou I te wā, nāna ka purutia ka pēnei ana. Ho mātou kāku e pēnei. Ka kaukau tonu mātou, ka tai ki wainganui I te awa, kai te hikoi. Ka tai atu ki uta I te mea, I ngā tātā o te awa he hohonu, mea, tino hohonu nei. Tōne me kaukau I te wāhi, I te wāhi hohonu, nā, ko te wāhi ki wainganui, ai he ono tū katoa. Ka tai a koe te hikoi. Ka tai ki tērā tūtaha ki te taone, kei kona anō te channel. He wāhi hohonu anō, me kaukau, nana ka pērā anō mātou. Tai ki, so ka tai mātou ki rau I te rākau, kuhu nā tu wā mātou kākau, haere tōti kātou ki te.
So he ākoranga tino nui kei te taiao I te wae tupu ana koe.
Oh, tino.
Yeah.
E tino, mai noa I mea tu o mātou kaumate kia checkina mātou I te awa. Kaua ka mātou tukuno I te awa. Mā te awa anō e checki. Nea, I te puna kaukau, I tō mātou puna kaukau ki roto I te wāhi e pātatāna ki te marae. Kei rei te poro rākau. Nea, koe rā te wāhi tūai mātou I te mea. Ko tērā rākau, ka tāia ngā mea pakupaku, ngā tamariki pakupaku te tū, ka ina ngenge mātou, ka tū mai I kona, ka tatari kia ora mai anō, ka teika kaukau anō ni. E te wā, ka nuku te rākau. Te tau I konei te rākau, te tau I kona te rākau, ka hoki atu mātou ki te pātautu ki ngā kaumai, hei pērā, ko te rākau e nuku ana. Ka kata mai ngā kaumai, ka mea mai rātou kia mātou. Mana chaki a koutou. Okay? Koutou. Hei tā koutou e anō, tā koutou hare koutou ki reira, chaki nehi a te wāhi rā, kei kona ia chaki ana I a koutou. Whakaroke, tī, eki. Ko te rākau I kona I te wā, nā, ka tai atu mātou ki te tauhou, kone, te koutou rākau. E nā huatanga katoa I kite I rongo.
So he kōrero whakatūpato, but he kōrero hei tiaki.
He whakatūpato ana. Ka tai ka kōrero rātou mga kai tiaki o te awa. Ko pane ira tēnā ko tū hei tia. Yeah. E nā tani whakatoa. Kare mate kuana. Kare mate kuana ki te awa. Kare kua paku noi mātou. Mātou katoa o wai kaukau ana I roto I te awa Waikato. He tino, te au o Waikato. Ko ngā mea o waho atu I a tātou I a Waikato, ka nui tā rātou wehi ki te awa nei.
So ki o whakaro tēnei āhuatanga o te tiaki I te taiao, mo te hunga o I nāianei, ngā te hunga rangatahi, pewhi o whakaro kia tāpiri atu ki nā mahi o te taiao, me te tiaki I te taiao, me nā āhuatanga mo te hunga o I nāianei, pewhi o whakaro mo.
Ko te raruru I ai nei, ko angaro e rā tikanga, nea. I te mea, ka noho I nā haere mātou ki te awa, ka mea tū ngā kaumātou kia mātou o mātou kuia. Tēnā haere koutou, I mua tū I te ruku tangātu ki roto I te awa, whakarite koutou I a koutou anō, ne? Me pēnei I te wai. Ka wako koutou e ware, ke kona o tātou tūpuna e teki ana I a koutou, ka tika te teki I te awa. Ka mutu he kai reira, kau e maumau, nea, ina ruku koutou mō ngā kaio, ai kapohi atu, whakahokia mai ki uta, ko ngā toinga, whakahokia atu ki te kāinga, toa hi atu ki ngā kaumātua, nea. So he te iwa, ka haere mātou ki te pia tuna, ki te hopu tuna, koe rawa mātou mahi. Ka hopu ki nā tu ngā tuna, ka tai ka huri haere I te marae, ka hari a ngā tuna ki tēnā whare.
Toha.
Ana. Koe nā ngā tautau o mātou kia mātou, nea. Tēnā mea te kai, engari, ina hopu ki nā tu koe ngā kai, haria, toa hi atu ki ngā whānau. He mara tō mātou ki runga I te marae. He mara. Ka mutu ka whakahui mātou, I te wā ka whakatō ngā kai, ke kona katoa ngā whānau whakatō ana. Ko tō mātou mara, I muri mai I te wā e tūnei te football field, I tēnei wā. Koe rā te mā, nā he mara I kona, he mara I muri mai I te whare o tūtata, mara nui nei. Kona katoa mātou, ko ngā whānau katoa. Nā, ka tai ki te wā, ka hauhake ngā kai, tēnā me te riwai me te kūmara, he pātaka I roto I te marae. Ko te nui ngātu o ngā kai, ka toa atu ki ngā whānau. Engari, ka waiuhi atu e tehi o ngā kūmara o ngā riwai, ki roto I te pātaka, mō ngā hui nui ki nunga I te marae.
He tikanga tūturu tērā no wahi, ne?
Ana. Poreda I pērā te āhua mai au e tino nohi ana. Katoa mātou, o ngā tamariki katoa. E kaue ana I ngā riwai, e awhina ana I ngā kaumātua, I ngā mātua, I roto I te mara. He mara nui tō mātou ki mea ki rangiriri, ki o kaio, ki te whenua o te kuini. Tērā taha, he mara nui, I tēnei tā o te whare o mea o mea mā tangata prei cordian, ti wharaware au ki te kaumātuara. Muri mai he tino mara tō mātou I kona. Nō reira, ko te nui ngātu o ngā kai, mā ngā whānau, engari ka toha ngia ki te marae, I te wā e whakahaerehi ana ngā mara ki rangiriri, koe te o ngā kai ka kaue ki te regatta, ka kaue anō ki te korone ama. E taraka tō mātou, tō te marae. Ko te ingo o te taraka nei ko mōkai. Koe rā te mahi a mōkai he huri haere I ngā marae, koi I ngā kai. Moi tunu mā te must be e tatana te wā o te regatta, o te korone hana, e whakarite ana mātou. Kia haupu katoa ngā kai ki runga I te taraka o mōkai. Kaue atu ngā kai ki ngā hui nei, I te wā o te koro nei hana, ka kaue katoa mātou katoa o te marae, ka neke ki turanga wāwai noho ai, ki raro o ia kimikimi. He wāhi kai reira, moi, o kumātou ana he o wāhi e moi ana. Mai a mātou e tamariki ana. Ko tei tā mātou mai ngā tamariki ko te mai roto I te whare kai, I ngā rā o te kura, ka kaue a mātou ki rā kaumanga. Mā te taraka nei. E rā mai katoa. Engari, ka ri whakai atu mātou kia tata atu mātou ki te marae. Ko te wāhi whakaritea he mea mā mātou ko te whare kai, mutu ana tā mātou mahi, ka kore mātou I waho atu I ngā whare kai nei. Ka ri pātata atu mātou ki te marae.
Me huri tāua ki te wā I kuraina koe ki te kura tuarua puta atu ki te ako ki tāmaki. Hea ho maharatanga I auawa. Ko wai mai e tino aki I a koe.
In my last year at Raupatu, I ko mea ko Selby Neal tō mātou mahi tei tērā wā. And I think I think I did something silly anyway. I swore at him. And he went to go and get my grandfather. And then I was sitting in the middle of the paddock. And all I could feel was the boot come, lifted me off the ground. Here's my grandfather. He said, "Hey, come here." He said, "Look, your principal reckon he's going to send you to Tipene." There are two of us, Piki Whenui and myself. He managed to get 2 full scholarships. And it cost my grandfather nothing. And at the time, the king was in the 5th form, I was in the 3rd form. Piki was in the 3rd form. Ka kaue au mātou. E ki Tipene. I stayed there for a year and my whole world changed. And I remember seeing your father. He came at the prize giving at the end of my 3rd form year. Tipene changed my view of education forever. It was very competitive. Whakataitai ana ki Wanganui a mātou ngā tamatāne ne. Everyone wanted to succeed because money was spent, and a lot of them from the north, from down the coast, you know. This was the only time that they could escape from their small communities, and they was a bit like us. I really loved school, and I really excelled at school. Yeah, and I came back for Christmas, during the Christmas break, at the end of the third form, and my grandfather said to me, "Oh, mino koe te kāinga. Ko mutu taku mai i te ruawaro." He was 75 at the time. He was supposed to have finished when he was 70, but he worked till he was 75.
Was there pressure on you to go to work after the third form, or he wanted you to go to school but just not away from him?
He wanted me to come home, to stay home and not to be too far away. He was at that time sort of, he had an illness, and so he was a bit worried. So I stayed, and then I stayed. So the fourth form I stayed. I went to Huntley, fifth form, and then I set school certificate. And I passed. And they said that I was the first one ever to have passed school certificate. They're from Waihi. Well, in fact, from that whole community, because none of my mates passed school certificate, And I remember that day because Hori Maipi is the little short Hori, and I were walking over to town to go to the post office to pick up the results. And I asked the postmaster for my results, and he gave it to me, and I gave it to Hori. And I said to him, "Open it." He opened it. He says, "Oh, he got school certificate."
And then after secondary school, what did you do?
I took a year off. I worked at the power station, and then I was helping at the college, the kapahaka team, when your father came. He says to me, time to get out of that thing you go to, go to university or go to training college. I ended up at training college at Epsom, and I became a teacher. And it was there that I started mixing with people who were in there, the movement, this is Hone Harawira and all those ones, all the activists of the thing. Yeah, it was a bit of a shock to me. It was a real culture shock because I'm very conservative. My upbringing was very conservative.
I'm sure people will laugh when they hear you say you're conservative with some of the statements that you've said.
That's right. When I was conservative, and holy shit. And then I not long after meeting these fellows, we formed a men's group, and then we bloody protested up at the museum when Prince Charles came. It was a whenua protest, and there was about 10 of us, and we were all standing there, with some police cordon in front of us, and then the one of the fellows said, "Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to try and run the line, or we'll go home." She says, "Oh no, we'll run the line." So we all got arrested, except Hone. We were running that way towards the police, and then I looked around, he was running. Hone was running. He was running to the van. Anyway, they held us in the cell all day from about 7 o'clock in the morning to about 6 o'clock at night. And then this woman came around with this, we're all in the police cells. This woman came around with these sausages and peas and mashed potato. And then from the voice, there was this voice that rang out in the cell. It was the voice of Manguawa. He said, "You fellas, don't you eat the food of the colonialists?" And we just, me and my brother said, "Oh, shut up now. We've been here all day, so we're going to have a kite." Anyway, it was the first experience that I was arrested. I said, "Oh, hell, geez." It's a bit of a,
So you had these experiences of being deeply kind of rooted in your community with tikanga, te reo, and then kind of education being quite a significant transformative impact on the choices you started to make. Then you go to Auckland amongst a whole lot of activists.
Yeah.
There was, I think, there's not really an appreciation for what shapes a person to lead, to be able to have their own thoughts, to be, highly spirited in terms of not afraid to challenge and test. And it's clear in your life that you were exposed to experiences that made you quite a strong character. And I'd just like to kind of get a sense, if I can, that period of time that you were in Auckland and the events that were happening around you that impacted on how you, I think, shaped quite a strong part of your character. There
Yeah.
was the Ngā Tamatoa movement. There was a whole lot of other things. What were they?
Yeah. So all of those groups were very active at that time. And we and so the people that I mixed with were members of all of those groups. And then we decided actually that we should form a men's group. And it was decided because we thought that we needed to be much more cohesive in what we did, much more organized in what we did, because we're all over the place, you know. And the women, they seem to be much more organized than we were.
That doesn't surprise me. It's always the case.
Yeah, and we're following them. You know, and some of the fellows said, no, we've got to set ourselves up. But what happened is that actually after a year or so, I said to them, no, this is not working. We're actually going to go back to our own iwi groups. That's where our strength is.
And that's an interesting period of time because pre-Raupatu settlement, there was the 1984 Hikoi to Waitangi.
Yeah.
What can you remember of that time? Because that, in many ways, that was where the pivot point was around addressing these historical injustices.
Yeah. And actually, 1984, the Hikoi was a watershed moment for me because I rallied all of the ones from Tamaki because at that time we had formed a very strong reo waiata group called Ngā Maramara, based in Auckland, and it was a big group. And so I had organised wānanga at home here, and Te Pue Polo was the centrepiece. She was the strong arm, and she would organise the wānanga with whati, with henare, with hori rawiri, the way we learned pai Māori. All of those taonga that we've learned came as a result of this sort of re-strengthening, finding ourselves as iwi people in Tāmaki. And then came the Hikoi, and so it was very easy for us to then swing the support behind the Hikoi. And I remember being in the meeting with the Hikoi leaders, Henare, your father, Queen, when the kaupapa was talked about, and it was there that Henare said, no, go, you know, that both your father and Te Kinui had talked, and that it was time for us to march. But even before then, your father had got us into small organised groups where that we could control our part of the march. So there's and I just happened to be one of them. As Ricky might be, as Timmy might be, John Tamaru. We're all a very tight group, and then our job was to make sure that the Tainui contingent stayed together, and that we were all organised for the march all the way up to Waitangi. It was the first time that we ever participated. I remember getting to Taupiri and ka te tiro ake mātou ki te rā, and there was a ring around it, you know. And I asked Pungi what how te tika o tēnā tui. He said, tohu pai tērā. Now, rawe te kaupapa, me anga tātou, anga whakamua tātou. So, you know, there were a lot of things that happened while we were at Tūrangawawa, and then we came to Taupiri, and then we stayed at Waihi the night. And so everything, you know, it was, we were caught by a movement, by a feeling that actually this was our time. Yeah. You know, I think it was one of the most life-changing experiences actually for me, going on that march.
And then if I pedal us through the history, 1985, Koro Wetire introduced changes to the Waitangi Tribunal for retrospective claims to be lodged, and that's when the claim around Raupatu was lodged, and then there was the Coal Corp case. And if we pedal through that period of time of the fiscal envelope, can you remember your thoughts at the time around the government's approach to resolving these claims?
Yeah, there was so at that time the protest movement was probably at its height, and so there was a lot of organised rallies against this thing about the fiscal envelope, which in my view was poorly informed, and poorly communicated. Because on the one hand, people got the impression that we were being pushed down a road where it was of the Crown's making, and that they were in complete control of that strategy. And then on the other hand, there was a loud voice, especially those led by the Waitangi Action Committee, who used to, talk to all of us about why we shouldn't support it. But then on the other hand, there was talk at home. The kōrero on the marae was clear that, this is our time.
You're no stranger to adversarial politics, and during those early, period of going into settlement, I think, in fact, you and I were contesting for Parliament and getting involved in politics, and then the settlement was reached. And that period of time when you were a politician looking at the settlement process and you had the privilege, I think, of looking at it from the outside in, understanding what was trying to be achieved and ingesting a little bit of robust debate and accountability into the conversation. I'm not sure if that's how people will remember it, because you almost became a critic of some of the challenges that were being responded to by the tribe in entering this new phase of settlement.
Yeah.
Can you recall some of the things that you really wanted to challenge in order for the outcome to be, a good one for the tribe?
Yeah, well, the platform that I always stood on was, that the people had to be involved in the process of settlement. After the settlement, because I remember, I was the MC on the marae when that signing took place. And then afterwards, Tim and I, whenever we went with the trust board at that time, your father, we often had to go and march Seymour of the marae, So I saw it on both sides.
You did, and you held relationships on both sides, like with Eva, like with, Hone, like with lots of people inside and outside of the tribe who had different views. How did you reflect on, the role that you played?
Some of it I think that was, unfortunately became very personal, and it should never have been personal. But I've always believed that there had to be some transparency over the process where our people were involved in settlement. And I just thought at that time that we were just quite there. So at that time, I wasn't a stranger to having my say. And in having my say, I just rubbed a few people up the wrong way. And that's not because that I didn't oppose the settlement. I actually supported the settlement all the way through. And it's been the best thing for our people. But it was from where I sat at that time, during those contentious moments, ka rau I whakapono e marama katoa no tō tāua iwi ki ngā tino kōrero o te settlement. to koina tapu I te rawa. And then I was quite a strong advocate to making sure that actually all of the kōrero was chef.
And I sense that what people don't appreciate is in the days that you were mentored and what you grew up in terms of tikanga, that robust taupatupatu on the marae. It was okay to contest ideas and views on the marae in front of each other so that there would be a bigger outcome.
Yeah.
You know, tērā te tauira I kite ai e koe.
Koina I ngā mau ki te tū, ki te wero, I ngā mema, I ngā mema o te pōri, me te pātai atu. And so, koe te iwa, ka tātou ki te paukai, ka whakatakoto hi atu a ka pātai. And I remember I tū te paukai ki Hora, I reira, I tau te kōrero ki Wainganui, I māwaka tō pāpā, me mutu tēnei āuatanga o te toe atu ki a māwano. I reira, whakai atu au, ka hariru mau I reira, mutu atu, ngā tohe ki Wainganui, ia hau me ngā mema o te pōri. Engari, ko tahi atu, and I remember, I tahuri mai te kuini ki te mea mai ki au, you know. Koe nei tāngata, I mate rātua mo te kaupapa, yeah. Mo te hemo tunu atu. Ko reira, mea te whakaaro koe, ia koe e tohe ana, Koe nei tāngata, hau te kā, au te pō te ao, pona rātua e mai ana I ngā mai. Ka taka te kapa. Ka taka te kapa I roto, ia, ko ki te atua I taku e. Nō reira, I tātou ki te paukai ki Ora, I reira, ka tuatua ki te mea tu.
So he tino tauira tērā, he tino tauira mō te āhuatanga o te taupatupatu, te tautohe-tohe, te tute-tute I ngā kaupapa, e hara ki te tangata, ko te take, ko te kaupapa, tuatu I te tangata. So pai tērā tauira.
Karau tuatu ki te whakaao I te tangata kā. I tuatau ki te kōrero I te kaupapa, ki te ata wero I te kaupapa.
And then, I mean, I reflect on that time and you had a pretty testy relationship with RTM, Dad. And then you come back into the tribe in a leadership role, in a leaderful way, because you worked with my mother to achieve the river settlement.
Yeah.
That the maturing of that leadership meant that you continue to make quite a strong contribution to the tribe.
You know, if there's one regret that I have, is that I didn't make peace with your father. That is something that I'll take to my grave with huge regret. And I remember when he passed, because Tim and I were standing outside the house, and the news came that he had passed. And I always was remorseful about not having the time to talk to him, because even in those times, I had a huge respect for him. He was the most, there's no doubt, the greatest political leader that this tribe has ever had. And what he did for us was amazing. And only he could do it. Only he could do it because he was he was a man for that time. And that's one of the reasons why I embraced with fervour and with enthusiasm the opportunity to work with Lady Laia Mauta. And she said to me one day, I'm glad that you're home. I said, look, I come only for one thing, and that is to try and be of service for my tribe, to at least try and do something.
I recall that she gave you a taonga matarau, because she recognised that in your lifetime you experienced similar things that many leaders experience, which is you're no stranger to criticism, that sometimes standing up and standing for something means you become or are perceived as being quite adversary, but necessary for a time. So I think when I reflect on the river settlement, because it was very different to the Raupatu settlement
Yeah.
in terms of beneficial for the taiao, looking to the future, getting our people more involved in being kaitiaki, Te Ture Whaimana being a guide for people to be able to do more for the river. That's a very different mindset. And in terms of going back to your relationship with the river as a child and being able to bring some of that thinking through with Raiha in relation to the river settlement, how were you having conversations about, well, who is this all for? What is it? What are we trying to achieve here?
It still is the greatest achievement of my life to work with your mother to deliver on the settlement. Because that river has, we are all inextricably bound with the river. My life as a young boy was intertwined with that river. I knew that river like the back of my hand, like all the other kids at home at Waihi. It was our second home. And whenever we went to her, to the river, we always felt safe.
Taua tikanga, nā kōrero a ngā mātua tūpuna i ngā wā o te mate o te māwiwi haere ki te wai. I tupu koe ki tērā tikanga.
Koera, I tino aro ki te hā o te awa o Waikato. I reira hau, marama katoa ana ki o nā ahuatanga katoa. He kāinga tuarua kia mātou. Nea, I tupu atu mā te roto I te awa. I kai mātou I ona kai. I kaukau mā te roto I tōna wai. Ka mutu I te wai o te, I te wā o te toi mahatanga. Koera te mai. Ka haere tika atu mātou ki te awa. Ki te whakarite I a mātou. Kia uhia ko te kākahu tauawhi I a mātou. Ko te awa tērā. Ko te koro wai atapa I a mātou. Kua tamariki mai, pakeke mai. Katoa atu mātou. Ko te awa tunu. Tō mātou kaitiaki. Tō mātou oranga. Nā reira I whakapau ai tuku kā ki te mahitai me tō māma. Kia te tuki te kaupapa o te awa nei.
I want to now bring you into the reflections on the 30 years of the settlement, because the learnings have been many, and the insights that you have are quite unique in terms of what have we learnt over these last 30 years. How would you highlight the learnings in terms of major milestones?
I think what you've seen in the 30 years is the many faces of this iwi. From a time when we sat back and your father was able to lead us, to a time when at least we made the bold step of breaking away from from what other people thought about us, and to taking an opportunity to be transformational. That's what he did. No one other than him knew what was ahead of us. So it was both exciting but scary, because there was no roadmap to follow, no footprints in the sand to follow. We had to make it up, and he had to make it up, and that for me that was probably the most the challenging time, because everything else, was just an incremental development from there. I mean, he challenged us that we should grow the pūtea, the settlement, in our time.
And in our time, you've not been short of vision. You've actually tried to push the tribe to look beyond itself as well. When I think about the Indigenous piece, the ability to forge some of those relationships, when I think about business and enterprise during the period of time that you've been involved with the tribe, pushing the tribe to think in this different way, always consistent around pushing the tribe not to be totally dependent on the government, whoever's in Wellington. So, when I think about, let's say, the last 20 years or 15 years, what have been the learnings and the progress that we've made that you think we should hold on to?
Is this innate belief, tō tātou whakapono, kia motu hia ngā here o te karauna ki runga i a tātou. Is this innate belief that actually we can live without being dependent on the Crown, that we can live on our own terms. And those terms are becoming much more clearer. The vision, the vision is much more clearer. And our growing economic power is a springboard, is an important springboard to that. Is how do we break the shackles of dependency? And I think slowly but surely we are making major inroads into that. And I think that in the last 20 years, for me, that's been one of the greatest achievements. The other one is that we have been able to reinvigorate our iwi. We have been able to reinvigorate the kingitanga at a time when actually after Te Rekini passed, there were always questions about relevancy. What is the ongoing relevancy in the future of kingitanga? We're at a time now, at a watershed moment, where kingitanga is its trajectory is like that. And I think that there is much more hope. So for the 20 years, there's greater hope to our abilities to survive and to build a much more prosperous future for our people. Because I think we are putting the planks solidly in place now. Where we have fallen short is I think probably one of the most important elements to our development, and which is research and development. And this college is our Achilles heel when it should not be. We have 78 PhD scholars. We've sent more than 10,500 young ones who have graduated from tertiary institutions around this country. There's no excuse for us not to have a college of research excellence.
So that's an outstanding challenge that we need to be addressing. What about, is our waka fit for purpose to get us to this next destination?
No. And I think that actually the tribe in itself and its entities in itself has evolved. We have to be much more cohesive. And I don't think the manner in which we are framed and organised as entities is fit for purpose.
So that's an outstanding piece. And in terms of the mana motuhake aspiration and the role of our marae going forward into the future, what are your thoughts there?
We're at that place. I think the 30 years has come, and so the next short while ahead of us is that we have to begin to devolve assets, our capability out to our communities. That's the natural progression. And while that we've built up a major, engine room, that engine room should be dissipating and be reduced in size. And actually the development should be happening in our areas, out to our regions. In my view, that it is time for clusters in during Sir Robert's time. He talked about clusters, and I think this tribe is more than ready to devolve its services, its capability, its resources, monetary, out to our people.
And that leads to a vision of leadership and succession planning and the future you see for tamariki and mokopuna. What would you want to see in the next 30 years going forward?
I see a future where our regions are strong. I see a future where the development is out in our communities. And so for our own morohe of Wāhui Pōkeka, I see a flurry of activity, businesses that are growing in size and in capability. I see a time actually when the tribe is in full control of the Ante Power Station and its environs. So, there's much for us to look forward to. I think slowly but surely we've put the building blocks in place for our people to do that. But at the heart of it, the manamutu hake should be reflected out in our regions, not here in the centre. The centre is strong enough to continue. It's out in our regions, in our small communities, where the development should flourish now.
And in terms of how iwi work together, is there a view forming amongst iwi about what that future looks like?
The unfortunate thing about treaty settlements is that it has created an uneven playing field. And so there's a division, those who have and those who haven't. And unfortunately, the gap between those who have and those who haven't is huge. And only time and the spirit of cooperation and partnership can close the gap. The job of Waikato and Ngaito is to begin stitching the unification of iwi across the country together.
Well, can I ask you this question then, and this will be cheeky and you can clip me later, but, how do we mend our relationship, for example, with Ngāti Whātua?
Yeah, and look, I think we're starting on that journey now. I think that, we got to get past the rhetoric and think about what does our shared future look like. So, many words have been exchanged and they've been hurtful. So of course they have. But, we get to live a life once. And in that life, we should be forward thinking about what is best for our people, not for the individual.
And there's always a chance to heal. Eh?
Yes.
When I think about the intergenerational impact of Raupatu on the psyche of Waikato, and going into a settlement which was imperfect but necessary, and then going through building the waka to try and ensure it could take us to the next destination and the ups and downs that we've had, there's always a place to heal, and so that the next generation can just move on.
Yeah.
Do we have that capacity to heal ourselves through this process?
We do, because we've actually got some good people. Our communities, our old people have, I think the environment, our tribal environment, our iwi environment has provided a framework to build people who have the ability to lead and then to also to forgive and to learn from our mistakes,
And you, in your lifetime, were mentored to a place where you have come now to be a leader of significance, that in the histories of our tribe, people will look to different moments. And I think the period of time that you led, whatever people's views are, was significant. How would you like to see the mentorship of our next generation of leaders occur?
I think that there should be more opportunities to bring young ones alongside people like you and I. Our time is limited here. There is much to be shared. There are situations that will never come again, like negotiations. But experiences that flow from it can be shared. And it's those experiences that should be part of a mentoring program for our young ones across the iwi. And I think it's time for us to gather them. These are the sharp young minds that need to learn from our experiences, and there's much to share. For me, I'm at a time when I'm happy to share. I'd like to leave knowing that people don't make the same mistakes as I have, that there are some learnings that can be quite critical to the future of our people. Leadership is a privilege, not it's something that people give to you, and so I'm sort of mindful of the book of Luke. To whom much is given, much is expected, and we got to share what we have. There's no point in taking it back to Taupiri. We have to share with our young ones and prepare them for the future. That is a responsibility for anyone who assumes any position of leadership in the iwi, including myself.
Mihi ana ki a koe mō tēnei kōrero me ngā kaura kei roto. He wānanga tēnei. Nō reira I roto I ngā āhuatanga o tēnei kaupapa ka nui te mihi atu ki a koe. Thank you.
Kia ora.